My friends, welcome to another video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to conduct your cost estimations in Revit. So this is going to be a video of interest for those of you that want to implement 5D BIM in Revit. Now, in order to compute your costs in Revit, you have to be aware of two things. Number one, the method that you adopt will depend on the type of elements. And number two, the costs can be computed either based on single units, so individual elements, or unit costs based on areas and volumes. And I'll show you the differences. And that would depend on the type of element that you have. So for costing purposes, we define um, our elements and group them into either component families or system families. What's the difference? Well, component families is where you have, for example, doors, windows, and then system families is where you have walls, roofs, and floors. So, as an example, I have this project that you see in front of you. It's a very small house. Now, it's not a realistic project, and you can see that I have various window types, and that's because I want to use that as a demonstration as to how you would compute the costs for these component families. So I'm using my windows as an example of a component family. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to go to Manage, and then make sure that your project units are set correctly. So you have your areas, meter squared, and then your currency. Click on currency, and you have several options. You can use Bitcoin currency, for example, but please don't do that. Let's stay traditional, and let's go with dollar, so Australian dollar over here in our case as their currency. So that's the first step when you're computing your costs in Revit. Now, once we do that, we go back to our View tab, and then you can click on Schedules, and then click on Schedule Quantities. Now, I'm going to be doing the costing for the windows, so you got to look for windows. So I'm just going to press on W on my keyboard and look for Windows, and there it is. And if I click on OK, then it will take me to this Schedule Properties panel where I get to choose a number of available fields. Now, the fields that I would want to add would be, and you can have sort of a browse through these fields, but an important one is definitely your family and type, and then your the level on which the window is present, and then you can also, we definitely need the cost, we need the count, and we might as well, given that it's a window schedule that we're um, developing, then we could also add our sill height, the rough height, and the rough width. So these are the main fields that I will be interested in. You can always go back and choose more fields. It depends on how you want to format your um, your schedules. So that's for the fields tab. If you click on the filter tab, there's nothing that you need to do. And if I move on to my sorting and grouping, I can sort by um, cost, and then if I check footer, I can have title, count, and totals displayed, and I want to divide that by a blank line, and you'll see how that will be represented in my schedule. If I go to my formatting tab, if you click on cost, you would want to add calculate totals. And overall, I think that should be sufficient. So if I click on OK, a schedule will be generated. But you'll notice that we don't have any costs. So the cost is 0. And that's because I haven't added any costs to my window objects in the model. So if I expand the first column, you'll see the various types of windows. So what I could do is I can add costs. So the one way of adding costs is directly on this on the schedule that you see in front of you. So I could say, each window, I don't know, maybe 120 for that type. And notice what happens. I have two types of these windows. So automatically, as soon as I update one cost for any of them, it will ask me if I want to change, or if I want to apply that change to all the elements of that type. If I click on OK, automatically what we get is we get the 120 assigned to our other types, so the windows that belong to the same type. Okay, so what do we have now? We have a schedule that shows the cost associated with this specific family. So a 910 by 910 mil windows. For the other windows, I could do the same as well. So let's say these are bigger windows, so they cost a bit more. And if I press enter, and it will again ask me if I want to apply it to all elements of the type. And if I click on OK, I'll get my costs. So notice now that I have my total cost over here is 240 for the 910 by 910 mil, and then it's $400 for the 1.81 by 1.21 meter windows. Okay, if I want to sort of format this schedule a bit more, you can just go on your left-hand side in your properties panel, and if you click on fields, as I said, if you want to add more fields, you could do that. If I go to my sorting and grouping, I could make changes, so I could sort by other fields such as family and type. And if I go to formatting, if I click on cost, as I said, we had the calculate totals. So all of that can be actually formatted by clicking on that left-hand side properties panel. All right, so that was for our windows, and that was just a demonstration to show you how you would do this cost estimation for component families. What if I want to estimate the costs of my walls, say, for example? Now, it's a different kind of procedure because walls are system families. And so the way you cost them is not based on the actual cost of each wall. So you don't have one cost associated with a wall, but you rely on the unit cost per meter squared, for example, of a specific wall type. Or maybe you have the cost of the material that's utilized in the wall, so a meter squared cost for the material that's utilized. So it's slightly a different approach, and I'll show you how we do that. So if I go back to my project, and if I want to estimate the cost of my walls, now note that there are two ways I could do it. Number one, I could do it through just associating a total per meter squared cost, and that would consider the cost of labor, the cost of materials, etc. So it's a combined per meter squared unit cost. And the other approach is if I have a wall that's consisting of several layers of materials, then I can associate per meter squared unit cost with that, with each material type that's present in the wall. So I'm going to show you how to do it in both ways. Let's start with the sort of total per meter squared unit cost that you would associate with the wall. Again, the way you would do it is you would hit on schedule, and then you would go to schedule quantities, and if you look for your walls, click on OK. And in terms of some of the fields that you would need, you would need your family and type to know what type of walls you have, and then you could go on to base offset. So that's where the wall starts, and that's going to be important if you have several floors in your project. And then we of course are interested in the cost and the count. some other fields that we also need: the area, and that is over here, and then um, you could also even calculate the volume. So, for example, if you're calculating the cost of your flooring systems, well, you might want to have um, you might have the unit cost per meter cubed instead of per meter squared. So in that case, you would definitely need your volume for your flooring system. But over here in this case, I'm just doing it for the walls, so there's no need for that. One other point that I want to mention is that if the way you would the ordering of these fields in your schedule, you can change that by moving parameters up and down. Um, okay, so I think that should be sufficient. Now, remember, as I said, the cost over here is going to be per meter squared, so that's not your total cost. So, but we don't have a total cost parameter. So the way we do it is we have to add a calculated parameter. So you just click on this button, and it would allow you to define a new parameter. So let's label that as total wall cost, and it's going to be a currency. We've already defined the currency as dollar, um, Australian dollars in the manage tab. And now we want to compute that total wall cost. And so the way you would calculate it is, of course, per meter squared cost multiplied by the area. So you get your area and then multiplied, so times your unit cost. So remember, this is the unit cost. And you would have to divide. So let me insert brackets just to make sure that I don't confuse anyone. So you have to divide that cost, because remember, it's a unit cost. It's not just a dollar figure, but it's dollar per meter squared. So per meter squared, and then I close the bracket. And then it tells me that it's not valid, and the reason for that is because I have to put in the 1. So it's per meter squared, so 1 meter squared. And if you click on OK, then it will allow you to add this new parameter. So now we're ready to display our schedule. If I click on OK, and if I look at my schedule, you can see the family and types of walls that I have. And notice that there's two main families. So there's one that's shown by these top 4 rows, and then I have another one at the bottom. Now the cost, as I said, this is per meter squared. And if I so as I showed you when we computed the cost for our windows, I directly inserted the costs from the schedule. So another way of doing it is actually, if you go back to your 3D model, and if I click on any of my elements, so in this case, I'm calculating the cost of the windows, sorry, the walls. So what I could do is I could click on edit type, and if I scroll down, so this is where you would insert your unit cost in that case. And if we go back to our windows, it's the same thing that you would need to do. So scroll down and notice that the cost is already inserted, because that's what we inserted in the schedule for the windows. But it's always easier to do it directly through the schedule. So, but in that case, because we're concerned with the wall, so it's a system family, and as a result, the cost that we compute is going to be per meter squared. So let's say, in my case, maybe that's about 220. So 220. And if I click on enter, it will ask me if I want to apply this change to all elements of the type. And then if I click on OK, and notice how I've got my my costs now per unit, so per meter squared, displayed for all walls of the same family. The other important thing to note is that this total wall cost parameter that we added is actually working, because what's happening is that the per unit cost, so the 220 is being multiplied by the area, and that gives us a total wall cost. And I could do the same for the other wall type. So let's say, this is a small wall partition that's located inside the house. So you could see them highlighted over here. So definitely the cost is going to be less than the external walls. So if I go back to my wall schedule, maybe let's say $80 per meter squared. And then again, it's going to ask me if I want to apply that to all elements of the same type. I click on OK, and I have my total wall cost now. So I can format this wall schedule just to look a bit neater, and the way to do that is what we did with the window schedule. So I can sort it out by the family and type. Then I can add a footer, and I can leave a blank line. And in terms of formatting, I can have my total wall costs. So the total, so if I can calculate the totals, and if I click on OK, and notice that now it's divided into two parts based on the family that I have, and I have a total cost that's associated with each wall family. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is relying on a cost per meter squared of material that's embedded in the wall. Now, if I go back to my project, and if I click on any of the walls, click on Edit Type, and notice that in this particular wall, I have several materials. And the way the materials are defined, of course, there has to be a cost associated with each one of them. So that's the cost field that I'm talking about. Now, the way to estimate costs based on unit costs of materials, we have to apply a different approach. So if I go to View, and if I click on Schedules, and instead of clicking on Schedule and Quantities, you would want to click on Material Takeoff. And again, I'm going to do that for the walls. Click on OK. And this time, instead of just relying on family and type, we are interested in the material cost, the material area. So these are going to be two important fields to add. So let's start with family and type, and then we also have to add material area and material cost. Note that in the previous schedule that we generated for the wall, we didn't have material area and material cost, and that's because it was a schedule quantity rather than a material takeoff schedule that we generated. And what else is going to be important? Maybe the base offset. All right, so as I said, you can always go back and add extra fields. We need to compute the total cost again. So the total cost, and it's just going to be total cost of wall. And I'm just going to mention that it's based on materials. So I'm going to add mat just to know that this is based on materials. This is going to be currency. And then the formula, again, it's the area multiplied by my cost. And remember just what we did in the previous schedule, you have to divide that by 1 meter squared, because that's how you obtain the correct units. All right, so if I click on OK, and if I have a look at my schedule, note that the way it's set up, it's a bit different to the previous schedule. So we didn't have any materials; it was based just on the family and type. Whereas over here we've got uh, we've got sort of we have the family and type, but I guess I forgot to add an extra field. So if I go back to edit, What I also need is my material description, of course. So, and I can push that up a bit. And if I click on OK, so notice how now I've got my materials displayed. So this cost is going to represent the per meter squared cost for the associated material. So for concrete, per meter squared, concrete masonry units, let's say maybe $240 per meter squared. And if I press enter, again, it will apply that unit cost to all other materials that belong to other walls, and you have your total costs of the wall computed. So that's sort of another way of calculating the cost. Of course, remember that you could also format this so that it's based on family and type, and the division that you create in the schedule. So if I click on OK, notice now that I have my schedule divided into two parts depending on the family and type. But in this schedule, compared to the previous one, so this is the previous one, and that's the one that's based on materials. I've got my material description over here, so I can see what materials that are embedded in the wall, how much these materials are costing me. So that was it for this video. I hope that you have a good understanding now of how to compute costs in Revit, and I'll see you in another video soon.